Over 94% of Osisko Metals shares are owned by institutions, strategic investors, and insiders. This is a company to take a hard look at. In this video, I'm going to share everything you need to know about Osisko Metals, ticker OM on the Canadian Venture Exchange, and OMZNF on the US OTC. And for full disclosure, I do own shares, so stay tuned until the end where I'll share my outlook on the stock and how I'm personally positioned. Osisko Metals has two past-producing brownfield assets, the Gaspé copper mine and the Pine Point mining camp, which is a zinc-lead deposit. The latter project, Pine Point, used to be the company's focus, but in 2023 they purchased Gaspé from Glencore, making it their new flagship project. So we'll focus exclusively on Gaspé in this video, as the company does in their investor decks. Gaspé is one of the largest undeveloped copper projects in North America and produced more than 141 million tons at 0.9% copper over 44 years. So this project already has the required infrastructure in place, and Glencore is already signed on as an offtake partner, which means they'll purchase all the copper and other concentrates processed from mining. Operations were previously shut down in 1999 due to uneconomic conditions with copper prices and ore reserves. But in the current copper price environment, mining the remaining deposit is attractive again. And there's also exploration upside to expand the resource as well. So the company is currently conducting drilling programs in 2026 with an updated mineral resource estimate coming soon and the preliminary economic assessment targeted for later this year. Between the remaining studies, permitting, financing, and construction, the company could see first production beginning sometime in the early 2030s. This sounds like potentially great timing given where the copper market might be, which we'll talk about later in the video. Now, stacking Gaspé against other copper deposits in similar jurisdictions and stages, it sits about in the middle based on this chart the company developed. This could improve, though, if exploration expands the resource. I do want to point out that unless I'm missing something here, the market cap data seems a bit misleading because it's just looking at total company cap, and some of these companies have multiple projects, but for those with single flagships like Osisko, such as Western Copper, North Isle, and Marimaca, you can still see strong positioning supporting their current valuation and continued upside. In any case, if you consider better metrics like enterprise value over pounds copper, then Gaspé is a bit undervalued compared to peers, and there should be a re-rating as the feasibility and other studies are completed. And that's also evident by the analyst coverage giving an average price target of $1.94 Canadian. Today it's around $1.18, which is 64% upside from today's price. Looking at the financials, the company has an $83 million cash position and $183 million fully diluted from financings. They have about $91 million in debt and burn about $8 to $10 million a quarter on exploration right now. So they do have a positive cash position to get through the drilling and PEA this year. However, they will need more money in subsequent years to continue developing the project. But that's a good segue into the next sections covering the management team and some serious strategic backers. And this is where Osisko Metals gets really interesting. As I mentioned at the beginning of the video, about 94% of the company is owned by institutions, strategic investors, and insiders. That's an incredible amount of backing and speaks volumes about the value these mining titans see. And I can't stress enough, these are some of the biggest names in the game, right? We're talking about companies like Franco-Nevada, Agnico Eagle, and of course Glencore, plus the others that you can see here. With the plethora of support from these giants, they will likely support the company's financing needs going forward as long as there's continued value upside. And they wouldn't have gotten on board in the first place if they didn't see significant potential. And the story continues to look promising with the management team. They have a track record of success, having delivered $11 billion in market cap value since 2003. And CEO Robert Wares is a co-founder of Osisko. Robert is also the chairman of the board for Brunswick Exploration, which is another stock I own. And Jeff Hussey, who is the COO of Osisko Metals, is also a director at Brunswick Exploration. Now, I had actually been following Osisko Metals before they bought Gaspé, and back then Robert had been aggressively accumulating stock, and he holds almost 45 million shares, which is today about 6% of the company. Bluntly, though, his percentage ownership was in the high teens back then. So, as the company has diluted from financings, I am surprised he didn't accumulate more as Gaspé was acquired and is being developed. But in any case, he still has meaningful ownership. Now, taking a look at risks, besides the execution risks of completing steps by the timeline, the other two worth mentioning are, of course, the dilution risk, as they'll need more capital over the years to continue development, but also the risk of where the copper price goes. Maybe in the short term, the copper price is a little volatile and weak, but the outlook of copper over the next decade and beyond looks quite favorable due to structural supply deficits and increasing demand. The amount of copper discoveries has dwindled into this century, and it takes 10 to 20 years or more to bring a discovery into production due to the required studies, permitting, and construction processes. And that is evident by Osisko Metals' timeline. They have a huge head start with Gaspé as a past producing asset, but since the initial equity raise in 2024, they don't expect production to start until 2032 or later, which is over 8 years. On the copper market demand side, there's continued general GDP growth and development, plus electrification, EVs, AI, and growth in emerging economies around the world. I talked about these same points in my BHP video. I'll link on the screen here. They're the world's largest copper miner, poised for significant growth as the deficits unfold into the 2030s, and I'm accumulating a large position. But back to Osisko Metals. So where does all this leave us? Well, there's a number of considerations. To be direct, Osisko Metals carries a lot of volatility and uncertainty with gas-based development, continued financing needs, and uncertainty with how the copper market will unfold. Also, from a global perspective, Gaspé is on the smaller side. However, it can't be overstated enough that Gaspé has a head start since it's a brownfield project. And not only is it backed by a successful management team, but you have a number of the best companies in the mining sector backing the project. So while there's absolute certainty on volatility, there's also a meaningful probability of success over the long term as they de-risk Gaspé and the value creation accelerates to fruition. And I'm willing to make a fairly large bet on that. Osisko Metals is currently my third largest individual stock position behind Metallo Royalty and K92 Mining. It's almost 3% of my portfolio, and I accumulated most of my shares around the 40 to 45 cents Canadian range. I plan to hold this company for the years to come and trim along the way as they grow, but of course that's always subject to change based off prevailing market or company conditions. On my channel, I share my entire portfolio, position changes, and the reasonings behind them. I also post all my transactions in real time on X. Subscribe to stay up to date on how I manage Osisko Metals and the other positions in my portfolio. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one.